Okay, we seem to be slowing down, so we might get going. And of course, this interview this evening is being recorded, just to let people know, but also that does mean that it will be available through the Rowing New South Wales website and on the Rowing New South Wales YouTube channel from probably tomorrow afternoon or so. So if you find that people have missed it, then they can always catch up with it by watching it on that channel. So hello everybody and welcome to the second session in the National Virtual Development Series, which is being brought to you by the State Rowing Associations of Australia over this next 12 months. Today's conversation is being brought to you by Rowing New South Wales. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands where we all work and live, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders joining us today. We recognise and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal people and their ongoing cultures and their connections to the lands and the waters of our states and territories. I should advise that in this conversation, we may refer to people who are now deceased. My name's Lizzie Chapman, and it is my great pleasure to introduce you today to Dan Noonan, dual Olympian, Olympic medalist in the men's quad scull and head coach at St Ignatius College Riverview here in New South Wales. Dan, welcome, and thanks for joining us here today.
Thanks, Lizzie. Great to be here.
Now, Dan, the topic we're talking about today is the transition from athlete to coach. So taking it back to where it all started, you're a country boy, aren't you? So how did you get involved in rowing?
Yeah, that's right. I grew up in a little town called Warren, which is about 6 hours northwest of here from Sydney. My mum and dad were on a cotton farm there, and so I had no idea what rowing even was out at Warren there, and I was just very fortunate that I was able to come to boarding school here at St Ignatius, actually, where I'm at now. Again, I still didn't really know what rowing was or anything to do with it. And when I came into year 7, my brother was rowing. So that was the main sort of catalyst for me to give it a crack. And then I just sort of went from there. I enjoyed it from the first time I came down and hopped in a quad at that time. And I seemed to sort of have a bit of a natural rhythm and things like that I was getting, told, which sort of always helps the confidence. But and so it basically went from that, and I just sort of worked through the years here at Riverview, starting in the quads and going into the 10-8s and then into the seniors. And then it just went from there. And even when I was in year 11 and 12, I really had no aspirations of, or even sort of any thoughts of going further in terms of Olympics or anything like that. And I certainly wasn't a standout in terms of somebody that you would think had the Olympic tattoo, plastered on them when they were 17 or 16. So I was a bit of a slow burn, and it got to when I was in year 12, and ended up making the Aussie junior team, that I sort of realised that I was sort of starting to get fairly good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it sort of went from there. So we went overseas, and I got a bit of a taste for international competition.
Right.
And it sort of, all it took for Simon Huxley from Drummoyne Rowing Club at that time came up to me after at a football game and said, "Why don't you come down to Drummoyne Rowing Club? And we've got a good little squad going down there. And why don't you sort of start with that?" And it all started very casually, and there was a group of about 10 or 12 guys that ended up down at Drummoyne Rowing Club, and it was a fair bit of drinking and partying and things like that, which was good at that age. And Andy Randall sort of ran the program, and he did a great job of just mixing the balance between work and everything like that. So I think I had a really good, introduction into the sport. One being at Riverview, but then also when I came out of Riverview, nothing was too serious to start off with, and I just I had the time to actually decide if I really enjoyed the sport without it sort of being forced upon me.
Yes.
And I was able to enjoy the other side of it, which was, you know, being around the a really sort of really great group of like-minded people, and then obviously having Randy there with Simon Huxley, it was a really good mix of sort of personalities, and yeah, it just a lot of the guys from that group of 10 or 12 ended up going on and representing Australia, which was, I thought, was quite interesting. And I think a lot of that came down to just the fact that we all had a deep sense of enjoyment from that experience at Drummoyne Rowing Club, and we sort of you know, we had a bit of a leapfrog into the next experience.
The next experience, which was under 23s, wasn't it? And
yeah,
quite
that's
a big
right.
jump from juniors.
Yeah, that's right. So I took me a couple of years, and I decided to whether sculling or sweep was going to be my go, and it ended up, I gave the pair a bit of a race for the first year or two, and it just wasn't working. And so I went to the scull and gave that a good crack, and the scull sort of seemed to take up fairly well. And you know, I think sort of being a little bit shorter and a bit sort of I suppose you know, very, very self-driven, it sort of seemed to suit me pretty well. So I just got out there, and I also liked the freedom that it gave me, that I was able to, you know, write my own destiny pretty much, and get out there and you know, if it didn't fail, then it was on me completely. So yeah, I took up to the scull and ended up making under 23 team over in we travelled over to Denmark, and yeah, we weren't an overly we were a good little quad, but it wasn't overly you know, you wouldn't say I wasn't going over there to win a medal. You know, it was sort of one of those ones, if we made the final, it'd be terrific. And we ended up racing in the heat, and somehow won the heat. And then we got to the semi-final, and then it was a massive cross head in Denmark during that whole regatta in 2000. And we ended up drawing a lane that was sheltered, so we got straight through the semi into the final. Then we drew another lane, which was again was a great lane in the final, and then we ended up getting a silver medal. So it was one of those regattas that yeah, I came away with obviously extremely sort of happy with our achievement, because I certainly wasn't expecting it. And yeah, it was a great experience. I went down to Melbourne and trained the quad. With Crouch. David Crouchet was in it. So yeah, it was sort of he went on to do, you know, great things, obviously, and so again, it was a positive experience, and I enjoyed getting out of Sydney and training it there, and seeing the Yarra River, and I don't think I'd been to Melbourne before then, so for a country bloke, it was good to sort of get out and sort of see the world a bit.
Yeah, and back here, you know, now there's a very defined pathway, and it includes things like the state team, the under 21 competition, to plug that gap between juniors and under 23s. But did you have that here?
No, we didn't. No, we didn't. I think it's great now, because the first you come out of juniors, you come out of school, and back in the day when I was there, and you just get, unless you're a very naturally gifted athlete, you would be sort of, you know, just getting absolutely belted on a daily basis. So you'd be up against sort of guys who are 22 that have been rowing for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
In small boats as well, because, you know, you hadn't done a lot of small boats when you were at school. So it was a really big transition, and a lot of people did fall by the wayside, and they got out of school, and they were sort of, you know, they were quite successful there, and then they get to a position where they're in C and D finals, and they just, you know, that they ended up just pulling the pin quite early. So I think the way it is now, where they've got plenty of opportunities with, you know, under 21 youth, all the Trans-Tasman stuff and all that, you know, all those sort of stepping stones, I think is great.
I agree.
It just allows boys to, you know, even if it's just getting a uniform, and, you know, even if it's a bit of a trip to New Zealand, or the New Zealanders come here, just something that they can, you know, they can just see themselves progressing on and on. I think it's terrific, because it was pretty brutal back in the day. Like if you didn't have a bit of, if you didn't love the sport, and, you know, you wanted to sort of really keep on going and going, it was very easy. And I saw a lot of really good athletes just end up, you know, saying, "Oh, bugger this, I'm not real keen on get losing by this much every time. And so they end up getting into other stuff and work and things like that. And then, you never sort of see them, which was a bit of a shame.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think there's a lot of elders here in New South Wales that I think we are really grateful to for persevering with building that kind of pathway. And what immediately comes to mind, Steve Handley and Sydney Rowing Club and Chris Noel at Sydney University, and they've really stressed how important that transition is from school to rowing. And I think we're pretty focused on it. And we're very lucky we have some great clubs. And as you said, that idea of having some fun and it's not too serious, but there is the opportunity is fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah.
So then I'm curious then about what happened about the next phase. So you obviously enjoyed that sort of under 23 level, but then you presumably moved into the senior ranks. I mean, there's that awful period where you're no longer under 23 and you're up against some really experienced people. Did that happen to you, or did you move straight into the senior team and there was no worries, no transition?
No, there was definitely a transition. So I was doing my plumbing apprenticeship at the time. So so when I got back from Nations Cup, what they call the under 23s, I ended up going back into work, and I was working doing my plumbing apprenticeship, which was quite taxing because it was sort of 7:30 to 4 o'clock every day, and I had to fit training around that. So for basically 3 years, I was training all the time down at Mossman with Bruce Evans, and then again with Nick Garrett, which was terrific, and it was obviously terrific having those sort of couple of coaches helping me out. But I just found that with all the work, and it was all manual work, whether you're up in a roof or digging a trench or anything like that, there was always going to be a problem with recovery and getting enough food and all the stuff that you're meant to be doing for a professional athlete or someone who wants to go really well at their sport. So I sort of fell by the wayside of that in terms of I was training morning and night and having a real go, but was just getting no return at all for the effort I was putting in. And at that age, I didn't really think about it like that. I just thought I probably wasn't good enough to make the senior A team at that time.
Right.
And so I sort of battled along there from 2000 to basically 2004, so a whole Olympic cycle, where I was turning up to nationals and doing all the regattas and everything like that, but just was well off the pace. You C and D finals pretty much constantly. So it was a little bit of a tricky time. Sort of developed a bit of mental toughness and a bit of resilience to be able to keep backing it up. And there were certainly a lot of times where I questioned myself and questioned whether it was sort of worth continuing on. But on the flip side, I was still enjoying it. I was tired as all get out, but I was still enjoying the rowing, and I had a good boss that was sort of enjoyed his rowing when he was a lightweight back in the 80s and 90s, and so there was still that connection there, and there was something in me, I suppose, like some burning sort of flame that just wanted to see what I could do if I was given an opportunity. So it sort of didn't take. It took till it was 2005 selection trials when I ended up again. I don't think I'd been in even a B final for 4 years, and so I got through to the B final, and I ended up getting on the start line and not really sort of you get in a way of thinking at that when you've been doing that sort of stuff for years that you're not expecting great things, which is a little bit unfortunate, but that was sort of how things were. But I was obviously very eager and willing to compete 100% all the time. I ended up winning the B final and beating an Olympic sort of triple Olympic sort of Olympian Jason Day. So, and it was I remember coming across the finish line just thinking, I just couldn't believe it. I was just gobsmacked that I actually for 4 years I'd battled well off the pace, and then for one race it just came together, and it was just such a relief that I was it was an amazing feeling. Even though I didn't make the team and all of that sort of stuff, that was a real sort of turning point that I just thought I have to give this a crack. It was a time where I just thought, if I don't give this a good go, then I'm just going to look back at it for years to come and think,
regret it.
Why didn't I? And so that was a big turning point, and it sort of took me, I suppose, a month or so after that, and a lot of thinking, and I ended up, making a big decision to finish plumbing, and I'd finished my apprenticeship at that time, which was good, I suppose, like in terms of getting it completed. So I finished plumbing and spoke to my boss and just said, I just wanted to give this a really good crack, and if it happens, it happens. If not, then at least I know that I was good enough or wasn't good enough. And then I ended up taking out a loan from the bank and moving in with Mum, and who was living in Willoughby at the time, which was good, and just started training and just training by myself. And training at, where was I at that stage? I was at Mossman Rowing Club with Nick, and started training there and getting myself ready for what I was hoping was going to be maybe an opportunity to go down to the RAS and do it properly and see if I could get the support there.
Yeah.
So I sort of so that was a sort of a pretty hard time, because I was doing a lot of the training by myself, but I was very driven, and I was in a position that I was well supported by Nick Garrett at that time, and then an opportunity came where I came over to Sydney Uni, and Rhett Aliff was coaching at that time, and he had the Old Italian program, which was a lot of high intensity and a lot of training, and that seemed to really work for me at the time. And so it just got me in a really good position to be really fit and really, really motivated to that when my opportunity came, to be able to take it. And I was able to do that really well. I got down to Canberra for the trials, and it was around about October, so people could be forgiven for being a little bit out of nick and not really 100% fit. And I just made sure I was 100% ready to go, even though it was early on in the season. And I think the RAS sort of looked at that and I suppose admired it a little bit, because I was so hungry to get a shot, and so they took me on, and that's where it all sort of commenced and got going.
For those who listening in who don't know about our previous system, the AIS was our national training centre, effectively, I suppose, and had both men and women, under 23s and seniors. So Dan, here we are again, you in another phase of transition, aren't you? Going from being based at a club to being based at the National Training Centre, going from working to rowing full time. It must have been amazing. Did you, again, was that easy? Was that?
It was certainly easier than digging trenches. No, it was. No, it was a big eye opener. Like there was there was a couple of things that really stood out. That how much better and it sounds very simple, but for a young bloke who was working all the time, it was a big sort of eye opener that recovery. So recovery during the day, like having a sleep or having a rest, and also getting an early night's sleep. So recovery in terms of just being off your feet was a massive part of going well, and also I couldn't believe how much food you could actually eat and not put on weight. So that the RAS are obviously with everything there, it was all sort of laid out, which was perfect. But they were the biggest things. I don't think I even trained harder than I was when I was back at Mossman. If anything, we probably trained a little bit less, but it was just a recovery time, and being able to actually train and then go and have a rest and eat and then have morning tea and then train again, and then just do it like the guys do it now. Probably not as the workload wasn't like they're doing now, but just having the ability to be able to do the training properly and then recover properly, and then do the training properly in the afternoon. Being when I was plumbing, I'd get to the afternoon and just be completely spent, and I'd have no energy, and then, it would just be a bit of a waste of time. So for me, the recovery side of things and the nutrition side of things were extremely important. And within the space of about 2 or 3 months, I was amazed at how well I was going, compared to what I've sort of done in the past. So it was a big eye opener, and that's what I bring across to the boys here about recovery and nutrition, because I tell them that I lived it, and I've seen one side and I've seen the other, and I can tell you it is night and day, if you do it properly.
Yeah.
So and AIS were very good. Brian Richardson was very supportive to me at that time, all the way through, but he was the head coach there, and so it's sort of, that was like the big part of the professional side of my career, like seeing how it's actually meant to be done. And then, I sort of, it was in a way I never really looked back from there. There was a couple of injuries and things along the way, but, I was pretty much in the team from 2006 then, in the quad, and then, all the way through to when I retired in 2012.
And that sort of brings to the fore your nickname in the Australian rowing community, which is Grandstand Dan, a title that you earned from stroking that men's quad scull in quite a few incredibly tight and exciting races on the world stage. I think your first Olympic Games was Beijing in 2008, wasn't it? And that was a particularly epic racing, wasn't it?
No, that was that was a one that got away really for us. It was we were a quad that we weren't going very well early on in the season, but then we just hit our straps in the last 6 or 7 weeks, and they started absolutely flying. Like, we were posting times that were just amazing, really, and we were in a position where we knew that we were going really quick, and then we got to the heat and broke the world record, so that sort of affirmed it. And then we sort of it was just lack of experience, I think, that got us in the end. That we missed out on the medal. We ended up getting fourth by about a centimetre or two. But it was a big thing for me. Another learning block for me, that just to be able to stay calm while racing and not get overawed. And I think we just once that world record hit and we started to get a lot of people sort of talking to us and people wanting to talk to us from back home and things like that. It sort of, although we didn't sort of think it at the time, I think I feel like it did have an effect.
Yeah.
And it just, we got through in the semi, we got second in the semi, but it wasn't the best race. And then, the final, we just didn't hit it. We just didn't hit the straps. And it was just, it was one of those sort of ones I was saying, that one of those ones that got away a little bit.
Yeah,
but it's still,
I was going to say, but it was the start of a quite settled squad, really, wasn't it? That went through that next 4 years, and saw you really start to consolidate on that. Use that experience to turn performances around.
Yeah, that's right. Before, in the years previous, Rowing Australia had a system going which I just didn't agree with, where they would be changing the quads, and the quad was my boat, and I wasn't really interested in any other boat. All I wanted to do was do the quad, and I went to I think it was Red Aliff and Johnny Dreesen at the time who were running sculling, and I said, I see the same quads turn up from Europe year in, year out. They might have one change, but it's basically the same setup. And I said, they would be looking at us going, what are they doing as Australia? Because we would come up with a completely different quad, and then the next year, completely different quad, and the next year, completely, so there was no consistency there. There was no actual sort of ability to actually get a combination and gel it together over years.
Yeah, and you've had that experience.
Yeah. So I suppose I sort of picked that up, even though I hadn't been sort of part of the international sort of competition for years and years or anything, but it was just a pattern that I sort of noticed. So I was very sort of fortunate to have someone like John Dreesen who sort of took the reins with the quad, and he was outstanding, and he was with us the whole time. and we were able to, even when the selectors were sort of talking about, changing people here and there, we were able to, have John as a bit of a spokesman and to say that, no, well, we actually broke the world record in the Olympics. Why don't we try and keep the similar sort of quad and actually get something going from there? So that was the start of, as you were saying, a really good nucleus of scullers that stayed together all the way through. So we ended up going to in the 2009 World Championships, and we were winning with sort of 750 to go over the Polish quad, and who were the Olympic champions, and that was with David Crawshay in the 3 seed, and Nick Hudson and Jared Bidwell. So it was a couple of new guys because the Jimmy McRae and Brendan Long and Morgo were having some time off. So that was So and then we ended up getting a silver medal. So I suppose that that affirmed us, for me, that the coaches were fairly confident to leave me in the stroke seat and sort of get the guys, obviously, have that nucleus of guys all the time, but sort of have me as a bit of a consistent person that sets a rhythm hopefully the majority of the time have a bit of a steady head, and show some good leadership. So there was that. There was I think that was a big sort of a leg up, I think. And then I, like, for myself, I was just getting more and more confident as every year went by, and I was sort of in that seat, and I was able to as I was saying, like, show leadership and say, talk about the way that I wanted it to feel and the way that, I knew it felt when it was going really well. We used to talk about staying behind the run, not being too quick to get onto the feet, all those little things. Well, Johnny Dreesen was big on relaxation and length and all the stuff that moves the boat. But it was a really good. I felt it was a really good dynamic to have Johnny in the boat. And then me sort of, at times probably barking orders from the front, but I sort of had a pretty clear, after a few years, I had a pretty clear way that I wanted to go about things, and then and everyone was on the same page. It wasn't like people were, there wasn't any argument or anything, but it was just having somebody there that could always bring it back to what actually moves a quad rather than what moves any other boat.
Right. Yes, real specialist in what you do. I remember watching you in 2010 going out to Lake Carapiro, and that was Crawsh, wasn't it? And Chris Morgan was back in the boat then, and
so was Jimmy. Yeah, so was Jimmy McRae.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So that was.
So he's starting to get onto the podium now.
Yeah, we got onto the podium that year. That was certainly a memorable one for the wrong reasons. It was just white caps at Carapiro, and I still can't believe that they actually ran the race, because it was, even when we were sitting at the start line, the water was above our feet, and I'm just thinking, no, they're not going to actually start this, and they just rolled forward, and it was just swishing, hearing the water swish down the thing, and I'm thinking, geez, I didn't think this would happen at World Championships, but everyone was in the same setup, I suppose, and we ended up getting a bronze behind the Croatians and the Italians. The Croatians won it, and the Italians got silver.
Right.
And then the next year was a standout year when we went to Slovenia, and we raced the World Champs there in 2011. And that's when sort of Crawsh went out into the double, and we got Carsten Fossling. Carsten Fossling came in, and he was terrific. Carsten was always a very natural athlete and a very, very gifted athlete, but he probably didn't have the success that he probably should have had in the sweep. And then came across the sculling and just absolutely just really was a great, not only a great crewman, but just outstanding physically, power wise and fitness wise and everything. He could just keep on going forever and ever. So he sort of brought that sort of side of it, and he sat in the 3 seat that year and did a terrific job. So that was an amazing year. We had our 10-year reunion a couple of weeks ago, actually, for the 2011 one.
Right.
It was great. It was all over Zoom, unfortunately, but it was still great to see everyone. We sort of spoke about sort of, you know, what we remembered. Big thing I remember was just how enjoyable and how the lead in, those 2 months leading in was just like impeccable. The training that we were doing was just, you know, the boat was just going so well all the way through. And by the time we got to Bled in Slovenia, there we had a really good feeling that something, you know, was going to happen. That was going to, you know, we were going to be up there. We were going to be, you know, up there for, you know, if it wasn't a gold or silver. So we didn't. No one could ever sort of imagine that the finish could happen like it did, where the Germans caught a crab in the last stroke, and we ended up sort of beating them by a bow ball or two.
Yeah.
So it was amazing. Like the whole experience was amazing, and yeah, just even when we finished, went across the finish line, I remember Jimmy McRae was sort of shouting and celebrating, and I was thinking, yeah, it was good. Like we got a silver medal, but you know, it's probably, you know, we were after the gold, and it wasn't until I looked up at the screen and I saw that we were in the gold medal, and I was just completely baffled, because when I last looked, the Germans were sort of, you know, a quarter of length or half a length up, and then we came across the line, and you know, and so it took me a while to actually. I think I had to ask Carsten, you know, what had happened, because and Jimmy was looking out of the boat, so he could see everything.
Oh, you must have loved watching the quad races at the Olympics this year, then.
Oh yeah,
oh, that was amazing. So then on to the Olympics, on to London. Another great experience there, in terms of close racing.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And it was London was, again, it was like we I was probably fairly well known. I got a bad rib fracture coming into London, and that was a really sort of a fairly big setback in terms of for our preparation. I got it down in Huon, where we were training there in Tassie, and it sort of took. There was a point there where they were going to rule me out, and you know, which was a really stressful time, you know. But they, you know, we kept going, and I just had to walk for sort of 4 or 5 weeks, and that was the only training I could do. And then they slowly built me into it. But by the time I sort of got going, I had lost a fair bit of sort of, you know, how it is, you lose a bit of fitness and strength. And but you know, saying that there's the race that we did in the final was the best race, you know, other than probably it was probably on par with the Bled race in terms of how the boat felt. So we ended up getting a bronze medal there, and you know, from my point of view, I was, you know, just so relieved, I suppose, that we were able to still come away with a medal with the preparation that we'd had. So it was obviously a little bit bittersweet, because coming after Bled, we had high hopes, and then, but you know, things happened, and the Germans who caught a crab ended up winning the gold medal. So so that's how it is. And the Germans and the Croatians, who the Sinkovic boys were in that quad.
Yes.
With Lear Martin, the sculler. So they're still going. We pretty much shared podium spots for, you know, the 3 or 4 years. So I think it was fairly fitting that the 3 of us ended up getting on the podium. And but yeah, no, it was as I was saying, I was you know, like any athlete, all you want to do is have a PB performance on the day. That's, you know, whether that's coming in first or last, you just want to have your best. And you know, our race that we had on our final was you know, certainly the best we've done all year, and if not ever. So it was a really big relief, and you know, a lot of emotions, I suppose, that we're able to actually pull it off when it was sort of, you know, when we were sort of on the line there, and things weren't going as well, and we were able to sort of dig deep and sort of get the job done. So
yeah,
and that was my last international race. So I ended up coming back and racing the King's Cup on that.
All right.
For the next year, but it wasn't in any, you know, good shape or anything. But but yeah, and then the King's Cup was the last race, last sort of competitive race I did.
And when you came back, did you know that you wanted to go into coaching, or was that an opportunity that presented itself that was like, okay, I'll do this, or were you intending to go back to plumbing, or weren't sure what you were going to do?
I wasn't overly, to tell you the truth, I wasn't overly keen on going back to plumbing. There was a part of me that just felt with my personality, I felt like I could make a difference, like in terms of communication, in terms of motivating people and being able to get the most out of people. And I just felt plumbing probably wasn't the right fit for me on that sort of sense. Mm-hmm. And so the coaching was a really good fit, because I love rowing, and I was given the opportunity to come back to the school that I went to at Riverview fairly soon after London, which worked really well. So I sort of came on here as a head coach, in a head coach capacity, under an MIC, a Master in Charge. And that just gave me a really good insight into giving me about 6 months or 8 months to be able to see how school rowing was again, and sort of what involved. And it was a massive step down, obviously, from the stuff that I was sort of used to. So it was a really big shell shock to sort of come from everything being completely high performance and borderline OCD in terms of preparation and technique, and everything was just thought about over and over again and executed to the nth degree and everything like that. And to come into a sort of a school program where obviously it is, without sort of sounding it at all sort of negative or anything, but it is you're dealing with sort of 14, 13-year-old boys to sort of 17-year-old boys. So it's a massive step down there, and obviously the having to sort of teach them how to row was a big sort of eye opener for me, because it's something you take for granted when you're rowing, and you just don't really see that side of it. So it certainly took me at least 2 or 3 years to start to get a bit of a hold on coaching, and it certainly didn't come straight away. And it took me a lot of times where we didn't have very successful seasons, and I sort of blamed a lot of that on me in terms of having the right coaches, having the right program, having the right balance of work to school, which was a big one that I found out, and then how to actually talk to the boys and motivate the boys in the best way possible, and so not treating them like an elite athlete, and but also not treating them like a school kid, so much, giving them respect, which you expect back, but trying to be, I suppose, relevant, and trying to sort of get them to be comfortable enough to want to do their best, but also understand that it is a sport, and it's not the be all and end all, and they've got a lot of things in their lives, like their school and their personal relationships and their families and things like that they're trying to juggle as well.
Yeah. One of our viewers has just messaged that you came back into coaching the first state for a season at Riverview back in 2009, so before you'd gone to the Olympics, and that was one of the main reasons that this viewer actually continued in the sport, because you were pretty inspiring as a coach even way back then. I think from what you're describing, the thought that you put into what you're doing is just as careful and as attentive to that as you are your own rowing. So clearly it sort of makes a difference.
Oh, it does make a difference, and it takes effort. And I've got sort of 180 boys, 170 boys that I, little things like knowing each one of their names, emailing them or speaking to them all, on a daily basis or a regular basis to see how they're going. Not only on a rowing sense, but mentally. This day and age with the amount of things they have going on in social media and all this sort of stuff, that the influences that they can get can be negative, and and so it's sort of juggling that, and you know, you can get. I've found that the more that you put in terms of trying to, you know, develop a connection with boys and their families and everything that's around that, not only on a rowing sense, then the more that you're going to get out of the boy, and the better experience the boy will have.
Absolutely.
Because it's not, you know, I feel this gone are the days of boys wanting to get yelled at by a coach and, you know, be criticised or anything like that. Boys have a lot of options, you know, and rowing is a hard option, and you know, and if you make it harder and you make it less enjoyable, then there's a fairly big chance that they won't continue on that sport, you know, which is a sport we all love and we've all had great experiences. So if I can be one of those really, really good, you know, mentors and people who give those great experiences, like I had with Nick Garrett and Andy Randy and Andy Randall and Johnny Dreesen, who I've sort of mentioned, plus you know, a host of many others.
Yeah.
And then, you know, that's a really rewarding thing for me.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you've been leading that program at Riverview College for about 10 years now. So you must have had quite a few learnings and challenges. Have they shaped what you do at the school now, in terms of, because you've talked about how your coaching experience has shaped what you do at the school, but have you sort of reflected on things and gone, nah, we need to change this?
Yeah, that sort of happened. So we went through a big transition phase, I suppose you call it, where I was able to, as I alluded to earlier, I was able to spend a bit of time as a head coach where I wasn't in the top job, and I was able to see how everything worked, and then I was able to assess in my own way what I thought could actually work better, and you know, what needed to be done, because at that time there was a big dropout rate in the squads, and so I went through, you know, every year group for the past sort of 5 to 10 years, and I could see that there was only 4 or 5 boys who had started rowing that were actually rowing, you know, when year 12. So that's out of a group of 40, 44 boys. So there was a, you know, everyone was saying that Riverview aren't that good at rowing, but it was the fact that we didn't have the people there that actually continued all the way through. So, you know, you always get terrific boys, and Riverview boys are always, you know, fantastic to work with. But there was no consistency of actually bringing the talent all the way through, or bringing a squad of boys all the way through, and then seeing them develop and seeing them enjoy the sport all the way through to year 12. So there was a big sort of transition of coaches, and I was very fortunate at that sort of exact time. I think it was 2014, where Mike Doyle came on staff, and then he also introduced me to Pete Warren, who's our boatman still. So I had a couple of really good people who came on board that was, and you know, I had a relationship with Mike because Mike coached me in the junior team back in '97, and he was also my first 8 coach as well for a couple of years back at Riverview. So there was that connection there. But the big thing that they sort of, I suppose, taught me was that, you know, you want them to do well, but there has to be a periodization in terms of they can only handle so much at certain times, and you know, when they're doing schoolwork and when they're you know, busy with all their other lives. It's not about, you know, sort of doing session after session, and that's how I think I'd got into a bit of a trap in the years prior, that I was probably overtraining the boys. And then it sort of came to someone like Mike, who was completely the other way, and he was all about quality and all about actually peaking for the head of the river, rather than just work hard all the time and just see what happens. So it was a really big eye opener for me to have Doyley there, and then to see someone like Pete, who amazing work ethic, and you know, really good with just doing things around the shed, but plus also his coaching and his ability to do all the little things like nutrition, make sure nutrition's right, and all those little things that make a massive difference. I feel like I was very fortunate to have that little bit of guidance there. And then we sort of, from there, it's sort of, we've just been getting a little bit better and better every year. So Mike's left now, and he's over at Shaw, but we've sort of been able to gain coaches, some really good coaches as we go on. So we sort of sit this year, having a really good coaching team, having boys who have basically rode all the way through, and dropout rate has been less than 5% from all years. So it's in a really good position. But saying that, I'm continually trying to find ways to make it better.
Yeah.
That's part of who I am, and part of what I'll always be is never relying on sort of past performances or doing anything the easy way. Try and actually do it, not the hard way, but the best way that I possibly can to get the right performance and get the right result for the boys. And that's what I always speak about to the parents about. It's trying to find each boy's personal best, and if I can do that at the head of river, then I've done the job. Whether that's winning or second or third, but it's if the boys can have their personal best and they can find their limits, then that's a really good outcome.
Good outcome, and an amazing gift to actually give them as well, because so few people generally in the community get the opportunity to test themselves in that way in a relatively safe environment as well. And it's an amazing sport in that way, isn't it? You talking about that, you're obviously referring to your characteristics and your sort of traits as an elite rower. Are there others that you think that you've brought through from your rowing into your coaching that have helped your coaching?
I think for me, the boys understand that I'm very obviously very determined to get the most out of the boys, but there's also the other side that I can be very relaxed, and I don't, the boys understand that they can, they can come down and they can, say g'day Nuno, and they can feel like I'm very relatable as well. So and then having that line is obviously it can be, you have to be a little bit careful with it, but I feel like the boys are able to differentiate now. So rather, as I was saying to you, having that sort of person that's sort of screaming at the boys and just constantly just white noise, I don't see that as a positive way of actually talking to boys and creating a positive culture. So for me, having boys understanding that we can joke around and we can muck around and tell stories and do all that sort of stuff that teenage boys love, but also understanding that when it's time to go, if they're not ready to go, then I'll sort of give them a bit of a revving. So and then I suppose the other side would be just I think they see they see how thorough I am with everything, and I think that sort of gives a little bit of respect, because they see that I'm constantly on the go. And the same with the coaches, with Pete Warren and the other coaches. They see that we're doing everything that we can to get the most out of them. So and that as you were saying with your question, that really comes out of rowing, in my personality. That if I didn't have something that would sort of challenge me and something that I could really sink my teeth in, then I sort of get fairly I suppose bored. That's the recent lockdown has nearly killed me, because it's because I've had to sort of slow down and just watch telly and things like that. So it's having goals and for me and being on the go and juggling sort of 180 boys plus parents and everything. I actually enjoy that, and I enjoy sort of the challenge of that. So like rowing, there's no doubt rowing has brought out so many good qualities, and I'll never say a bad word about it because of it. I was a country, very shy country boy that hardly said anything when I was a younger guy, and then in terms of just what it's done for me, not only the opportunities it's given me, but also being able to do something that I love, and seeing, you know, it actually being a good thing for me and for my personality, and, you know,
Yeah.
has been extremely rewarding.
Fantastic story. We've had, so guys who are listening in now, if you have any specific questions for Dan, please don't hesitate to use that chat function and send a message, and we'll try and answer your questions. But we've had one ahead of the presentation from Jen Zuster in Victoria, who wondered what the hardest part of the process was for you in transitioning from being an athlete to being a coach. You know, that change of lifestyle, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a very hard transition for any athlete, you know. And I suppose I was a little bit vocal about it when it happened for me, because it was a massive come down, you know, the Olympics, and then coming in and doing nothing. As I was saying, as I alluded to earlier, like, you know, people who are driven don't need idle time. Like, it just doesn't really work too much. So you need to be on that. You need to keep people moving and keep you know, that type of personality. And I found I had a lot of spare time, and, you know, you end up, you know, not spending that spare time wisely, you know. So it was, for me, I probably wasn't in the best frame of mind when I transitioned into coaching. So I was very relieved that I did have something to go to. But I suppose what it's the big thing for me is actually finding meaning and finding the real enjoyment about, you know, getting even a year 7 boy or a year 8 boy who's learning how to row, and getting to know them and getting to know their personality, and you know, it's that sort of side of things that I couldn't actually see when I transitioned. I just wasn't in that mind frame. I just saw a bunch of kids who couldn't row, and, you know, a few of them had bad attitudes and things like that. So it did take a few years for me to actually, you know, and I'm still sort of, you know, trying to sort of develop my coaching as much as possible, and everything like that. But I was coming back to Dawley. I was very fortunate that he sort of broke it down in terms of a technical point of view. To be on that sort of side, he was very, he kept it very simple. So he worked on just a few really simple things, again, that probably don't even get mentioned too much in club rowing or international rowing. But for boys who are just starting out and are trying to move big boats fast, it all sort of made sense. And, you know, and so that's things that I bring in today, like, you know, lots of exercise, lots of pause, lots of fours, not trying to get ahead of ourselves, and just teaching them how to row. Has been a massive sort of transition for me, because, you know, you can, as we all know, you can be as fit as all hell, and you can be as strong as anything, but if you don't know how to row, and you're pulling that boat apart, then it's just not going to happen. So so it was a big transition for me in terms of the physical side. I could see that, you know, especially in that first year or two, I just ended up overtraining the boys, and so I had to cut that right back, and I had to, you know, be able to make it maintainable for the boys to still see improvement, but not to be completely flogged every week. And then the technical side of things. So just to focus on a few little things that actually make the boat go fast, that are really basic, and just keep on working on that, you know, day in, day out, all the way through. So it never becomes a situation where the athlete is saying, what the hell is he talking? Why is he talking about that when he was, you know, today, when he was talking about something different yesterday? And then that just creates a big sort of thing of confusion. And, you know, boys being boys, they don't take too much in at the time. So you've got to keep it really sort of simple and really quick and you know, to the point. That's right.
Something a bit less simple is parents, of course, the relationships that you have to manage when you're a head coach, and I believe now master in charge of rowing as well. Will Raven is based in South Australia now, but you obviously know him from coaching him at school, and he asks, what's your advice for managing parents in the school program compared to an elite or club side where parents don't have as much involvement?
Well, for me, I was I have always respected the fact that parents want to ask questions and they want the most for their boys. But I also make it very clear that that I'm the head coach also, and I'm the person that is employed to do this role for a reason. So a lot of it comes down to being fair. I'm always very fair. So boys earn their seat because they actually earn their seat, and I've never given any favoritism. And parents, the Riverview parents have been absolutely fantastic to me during my time on the whole, because I think it is very transparent. And as long as you're transparent and the boys are going home and saying, "Oh, I got dropped because of this," I probably understand that, and then it becomes okay. I think when there's problems if parents think that there's anything that's happening that's unfairly towards their son or anything like that. And obviously, that if anything happens that is untoward in terms of behaviour, then that gets pulled up straight away. So the parents understand that. Yes, the boys are coming down here to row, but I always make it very clear that we're teaching life skills here about what we want, what you want your son to end up like. And so if there's ever any discipline problems, or if there's any ever problems that I need to speak to the parents about, then I say, listen, you can criticize me, but all I'm trying to do is create a young man that actually goes out into the world and is successful, but also knows knows wrong and right, and knows how to respect people, and knows how to work in a team, and all these little things that you need to develop if you want to be successful in business or sport or anything. So I feel there's a mutual respect there between myself and the parents, and with how we are with training and things like that, I do get parents to come and help at times, but there's also got to be an understanding that they have to sort of keep a bit of a distance there, just so it's not, just to allow their son to actually come down and go rowing without sort of having much input other than their coaches there.
Yeah. And talking of your coaches, a question from Kai Binion in WA was, he was asking about the coach development pathway, yours, how you organise things for your coaches. Do you, I mean, you've described the pathway to me about coming in, observing, learning, changing, improving. Is that something you think can be set up as a formal pathway?
Although I'm running a coaching clinic for the rowing coaches tomorrow, and I just make things as simple as possible, and I try and get everybody on the same page, and a lot of that comes down to communication. Being organised is a massive part of that. So if I'm not organised, the coaches aren't going to be organised, or if I'm not communicating well, then the coaches aren't sort of going to be able to communicate their voice to the boys. So it's really important that and the way I train the coaches is exactly how I want to coach, and exactly how I perceive the way that we want to row as a club, not from all the way down from the first aid to the year 8 quads. And again, I have some basic exercises that I want everybody to do, and why we're doing it. I get very good buy-in from the coaches, and as I sort of spoke about earlier, the terrific group of young men and women that are always really supportive. So I suppose the pathway for me was learning as I went, I suppose, because I came into an environment that there wasn't that many, or if any coaches that I could sort of look to be able to ask questions and emulate and things like that. And it wasn't, as I was saying, it wasn't until Mike came and Pete and then we ended up getting some great coaches here that I was able to bounce ideas off and have that sort of that time where I could go out and see what actually worked, and how sort of how schoolboy coaching was, actually helped the school, actually helped the boys and things like that. But yeah.
Yeah. And I think probably final question, John Langford thanks you for a great story and says, do you ever see yourself competing in masters rowing?
See, I see Johnny out every Sunday. I yell out to him, not every Saturday, because I get out rowing as much as I can, and
good on you.
Out there in the singles. So, Johnny, it's a work in progress. I actually was going to compete in the New South Wales Masters this year, but it got cancelled because of COVID. The river was too high or something.
Oh yes.
So,
yes.
So yeah, but I love, as I was saying, I love getting out on the water. I get out most mornings, and I sort of love keeping fit. So that's so you never know, Johnny. I might come up against you soon.
Well, there'll be a seat at Drummoyne for you. That would be lovely, wouldn't it? Right back. Thank you so much, Dan. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. Really interesting hearing your story and all those transitions that you've been through and have negotiated really successfully. Congratulations with all of the success you're having now. And I think most importantly, how you're influencing young people, as you say. And I think looking at all of the names on the screen in front of me, I know most of the viewers are as passionate as I am and as you are about rowing is so much more than a sport. As you say, it teaches life skills, builds an amazing community, not only locally, but internationally, and gives everybody so much pleasure, sometimes pain too. Some of the people watching here have been to the Olympics or the Paralympics recently, and others are enjoying their masters rowing, and others are fairly new to the sport. So it's really wonderful to see such a broad cross-section of our own community join us here this evening. Thank you again, Dan. As I mentioned, the link to this recording is going to be available on the Rowing New South Wales website and also on Rowing New South Wales's YouTube channel. So if you've enjoyed this as much as I have, you can always click on that once it comes up and relive it all over again. Dan, thanks ever so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll really look forward to seeing you. Hopefully we'll get back into have regattas, and we'll enjoy looking forward to seeing you around the circuit.
Thanks very much, Lizzie, and thanks everyone for attending. Much appreciated.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. That was terrific. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Lizzie. Thanks. No, it was great.
We'll do it again next time you do a transition.
That's right. All right.
See you soon then. Good night.
Thanks, Lizzie.